Andrew Collins had spent years mastering control. Every decision in his life was calculated, every move planned with precision. But in the span of a single evening, everything he thought he knew was ripped away. It started as a simple act of kindness, buying two little girls' teddy bears in a toy store. He hadn't expected anything in return, hadn't given it a second thought. But then their mother turned around, and in one heartbeat, his entire world came crashing down. Because the girls weren't just strangers. They were his daughters. And he had never even known they existed. Andrew Collins had spent the entire day in back-to-back meetings, negotiating deals and reviewing contracts, barely stopping long enough to take a breath. His life was a constant stream of numbers, strategies, and corporate decisions, and that was exactly how he liked it. He thrived in control, in precision, in knowing exactly what the next step would be. But by the time evening rolled around, something inside him told him he needed a break. Not the kind of break that involved expensive restaurants or business events, but something simpler. That was how he found himself walking into a small toy store, the kind he hadn't stepped into since his own childhood. The moment he entered, he was met with the soft chime of the doorbell and the scent of new plastic and plush fabric. Shelves were lined with colorful toys, from stuffed animals to action figures, board games to dolls. He didn't even know where to start. He wasn't the kind of man who bought toys, but earlier that day, his business partner had casually mentioned his daughter's birthday, and for some reason, Andrew had decided to pick out something himself instead of just sending an assistant. Maybe it was an attempt to do something a little more personal, or maybe he just needed to clear his mind, but either way, here he was, walking aimlessly down an aisle, feeling completely out of his element. As he scanned the shelves, his attention was pulled by the soft voices of two little girls standing a few feet away. They were identical, blonde hair, bright blue eyes, dressed in matching white dresses, their small fingers clutching plush teddy bears as they inspected them closely. They looked to be around 5 years old, their voices filled with excitement as they compared the toys in their hands. "This one is cuter," one of them said, hugging a white teddy bear against her chest. "No, this one is better," the other insisted, holding up a brown one. Andrew wasn't sure why he stopped to watch them, but something about their enthusiasm made him pause. They were debating so seriously, their tiny faces scrunched up in concentration, as if they were making the most important decision in the world. Then, after a moment, one of them flipped over the price tag and her expression changed. She turned to her sister and whispered something, and just like that, the excitement dimmed in both of their eyes. "We can't," the first girl mumbled, lowering her gaze. "Mom said no toys today," the second one added, shifting her grip on the bear as if she were reluctant to let go. Andrew felt something unexpected tighten in his chest. He had spent his entire life around wealth, around people who didn't think twice about spending thousands on things they didn't even need. Seeing these two little girls hesitate over something as simple as a stuffed animal felt strangely out of place in his world. Before he even realized what he was doing, he stepped forward. "What if you take both?" he asked, his voice calm but warm. The girls turned to him in unison, their big blue eyes wide with surprise. "Really?" one of them asked hesitantly. Andrew nodded, reaching for both teddy bears from the shelf. "Really? If you like them, you should have them." The second girl tilted her head, studying him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Why?" He let out a small chuckle at her caution. "Because sometimes people should get nice things, just because." The first girl's face lit up with pure delight, while the second one still seemed unsure. But when she glanced at her sister's excitement, she finally gave in, her small hands gripping the bear tighter. "Thank you, mister," the first one chirped, bouncing slightly on her feet. "You're really nice," the second added, her smile growing. Andrew found himself smiling too, something rare and unexpected. "I try." As he walked them to the register, the girls stayed close, whispering to each other in hushed voices. He could tell they weren't used to this, to random acts of kindness from strangers, and for some reason, that made him feel even better about doing it. When the cashier rang up the bears, Andrew handed them to the girls himself, watching as they hugged them tightly, their joy so pure and unfiltered that it almost caught him off guard. "Make sure you take good care of them," he said, not sure why he suddenly felt so invested in this small moment. "We will," they promised in unison, their matching voices making him chuckle. Then, just as quickly as they had entered his evening, they turned and ran toward the exit, their excitement carrying them forward. Andrew watched them go, shaking his head slightly at how such a small act had turned into something oddly meaningful. He turned back to the shelf, ready to finally pick out a gift and leave, but just as he reached for a toy, something made him glance toward the door again. The girls had run straight into the arms of a woman standing just outside, their little hands tugging at her sleeves as they excitedly showed off their new toys. She bent down, brushing a strand of dark brown hair behind her ear as she listened to them, her lips parting slightly in surprise. Then, as if sensing his gaze, she looked up. Andrew's entire body went still. His heart slammed against his ribcage, his breath catching in his throat. Because standing there, holding on to the hands of the two little girls, was a face he hadn't seen in 5 years. Kate. The name barely left his lips, but he knew she had heard it. Her expression froze, her grip on the girls tightening, her blue eyes locked onto his. She looked exactly the same long brown hair, same striking blue eyes, same way her lips parted slightly when she was caught off guard. But this wasn't just an unexpected reunion. This was something bigger. Because now, as he looked at the two little girls holding on to her, their blonde hair shining under the store lights, their blue eyes identical to his own, he felt his entire world tilt on its axis. The girls weren't just random children. They were his. And he had never even known they existed. Kate felt her entire body freeze the moment her eyes met Andrew's. It was a moment she had spent years dreading, the one she had convinced herself would never come. She had told herself that their worlds were too different now, that she had done the right thing by keeping her distance, but as she stood there holding the hands of their daughters, she realized just how fragile that illusion had been. The girls were still tugging at her sleeves, their little voices filled with excitement as they told her about the kind man in the store who had bought them the teddy bears. Kate barely registered their words, her mind too busy processing the fact that the very man she had kept them from all these years was standing just a few feet away, staring at her as if the ground had just been ripped out from under him. Andrew took a step forward, his blue eyes locked onto hers, but there was something different in them now, something that hadn't been there the last time they had seen each other. His gaze flickered to the girls, and Kate saw the exact moment the realization hit him. She knew it before he even spoke. "They're mine," he said, his voice quiet but firm, as if saying it aloud would make it real. Kate felt her throat tighten, her heart pounding so loudly that she was sure he could hear it. She could see the calculation in his expression, the way his mind was racing to fit the puzzle pieces together, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides as he fought to stay composed. "Kate." His voice was different now, rougher, edged with something raw. "Tell me the truth." The girls were still standing beside her, unaware of the storm brewing between the adults. She couldn't do this here, not in front of them, not like this. She forced herself to take a steadying breath before crouching down to their level, tucking a loose strand of blonde hair behind one of their ears. "Why don't you two go pick out a book?" she suggested, keeping her voice light even though her hands were shaking. "Mommy needs to talk to someone for a minute." The girls exchanged a look, clearly sensing the tension, but they nodded obediently before skipping toward the bookstore section a few aisles away. The second they were out of earshot, Andrew stepped closer. "How long have you been planning to keep this from me?" His voice was low, controlled, but she could hear the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Kate swallowed hard. "Andrew. How old are they?" he cut in, his eyes never leaving hers. She hesitated, knowing there was no way out of this now. 5, she admitted quietly. His breath caught for a moment, and he exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair as if trying to ground himself. 5, he repeated, almost to himself. So they were born right after, he trailed off, but she knew exactly what he was thinking. Right after she had left. Andrew shook his head, letting out a bitter laugh. So that's why you disappeared. Kate felt a sharp pang in her chest. I didn't disappear, she said, her voice softer now. I made a choice. His expression darkened. You made a choice for me. She flinched at the truth in his words. I thought I was doing the right thing. The right thing. He let out a disbelieving breath, his frustration finally breaking through the controlled mask he always wore. Kate, you kept my children from me. You didn't even give me the chance to decide if I wanted to be in their lives. You just assumed. I assumed because I knew you, she interrupted, her voice shaking slightly. I knew how much you cared about your career, how much you valued your freedom. You told me yourself that you weren't ready for a family, that you didn't want to settle down, that you had bigger things to focus on. His jaw tightened. And you didn't think that maybe I had the right to change my mind? She took a slow breath, trying to hold herself together. I didn't want them to feel like an obligation, Andrew. I didn't want them to grow up knowing that their father only showed up because he felt guilty or pressured. His eyes flashed with something unreadable. Is that what you think of me? Kate hesitated, then shook her head. No. But back then, I was scared. I was alone. And I didn't know if you'd ever forgive me if I told you. Andrew exhaled sharply, his frustration shifting into something else, something closer to hurt. He ran a hand down his face, looking away for a moment before locking eyes with her again. So what now? His voice was quieter now, but no less intense. Do you expect me to just walk away? Kate's chest tightened. No. Good, he said, his jaw set with determination. Because I won't. For the first time since she had seen him again, she truly believed him. Kate had imagined this conversation 1,000 times over the past 5 years. In some versions, Andrew was furious, shouting accusations at her. In others, he was indifferent, confirming all of her worst fears that he would have never wanted to be a part of their daughters' lives. But this quiet intensity, this raw emotion in his eyes, was something she hadn't prepared for. She could feel the weight of his stare as he processed everything, the muscles in his jaw tightening and releasing like he was struggling to keep himself from exploding. She knew Andrew well enough to understand that when he went silent, when his mind was working through the information faster than he could form words, it was only a matter of time before he found a way to take back control. And right now, she could see him trying to figure out exactly where he stood in all of this. He finally exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face before lowering it, his blue eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach twist. I need to see them again. Kate stiffened. Andrew. I'm not asking, he cut in, his voice firm but not unkind. They're my daughters, and I'm not going to pretend they don't exist just because I didn't know about them before today. Kate swallowed hard. It's not that simple. His eyes darkened. It is to me. She looked away, biting her lip. They don't know who you are. They don't know they have a father. Andrew's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something vulnerable passing through his gaze before he masked it with determination. Then it's time they find out. Kate knew this moment would come, but she had no idea how to prepare for it. She had spent years protecting them, keeping them safe from the possibility of disappointment, of a father who might not have wanted them if he had known. But now, standing here, facing the reality she had kept buried for so long, she could see that she had underestimated him. He wasn't walking away. He wasn't lashing out or trying to push the blame on her. He was standing his ground, ready to fight for a place in their lives, and she wasn't sure if she was relieved or terrified. She forced herself to take a breath. They're still inside, she said hesitantly, glancing toward the bookshelves where the twins were flipping through colorful pages, completely unaware of the storm unraveling around them. But this can't happen all at once. I need to introduce you to them the right way. Andrew nodded, his expression serious. How? Kate hesitated. Give me some time. Let me talk to them first, let me explain things in a way that won't scare them or confuse them. They're only 5, Andrew. They don't understand things the way we do. His jaw tightened, and she could tell he hated the idea of waiting, but after a moment, he nodded. Fine. But I want to be part of this, Kate. I don't want to wait weeks or months for you to decide when the right time is. I need to know them. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe that maybe this wouldn't be as disastrous as she had feared. Maybe he really meant it. Maybe he was ready in a way he hadn't been back then. She exhaled slowly. Okay. His brows furrowed slightly, like he hadn't expected her to agree so easily, but she straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze with determination. I'll talk to them tonight. And if they're okay with it, we can set something up for you to see them soon. Andrew studied her carefully before giving a slow nod. Soon, he repeated, making it clear that he wasn't going to let her push him away. Kate's stomach twisted as she glanced at her daughters, their innocent giggles filling the air as they flipped through their books. They had no idea how much their world was about to change. And neither did she. Kate spent the entire drive home trying to figure out how she was going to explain this to them. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror at the 2 little girls in the back seat, their matching blonde heads bent over their new teddy bears, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside her. How did you tell 2 5-year-olds that the man who bought them toys wasn't just a kind stranger but their father? How did you make them understand something so big, so life-changing, without scaring them or making them feel like their world was suddenly unfamiliar? By the time she pulled into the driveway, her hands were gripping the steering wheel too tightly. She forced herself to take a deep breath before turning around in her seat. The girls were still lost in their own little world, giggling as they made their stuffed animals talk to each other. Girls, Kate said gently, waiting until they both looked up. Mommy needs to talk to you about something important, okay? Both of them immediately stilled, their bright blue eyes watching her with curiosity. Is it about the teddy bears? Emily asked, clutching hers to her chest. Kate let out a soft breath. No, sweetheart, it's about the man who gave them to you. Both girls perked up instantly. He was nice. Sophie chimed in, kicking her little feet excitedly. He said sometimes people should get nice things just because. Kate forced a smile, her heart aching at how easily they had accepted Andrew's kindness. I know, baby. But, there's something I need to tell you about him. Emily tilted her head slightly, her fingers running over the soft fur of her bear. What? Kate hesitated, choosing her words carefully. That man, he's someone very special. He's not just a nice person. He's actually someone you were supposed to know a long time ago. Sophie frowned in confusion. Like Mommy's friend? Kate swallowed, her throat tight. No, sweetheart. He's your daddy. Silence filled the car. Emily and Sophie stared at her, their identical faces frozen as they processed what she had just said. Kate knew she had to let them work through it in their own way, so she stayed quiet, giving them space to react. Finally, Emily's little brow furrowed. Our daddy, she echoed, her voice unsure. Kate nodded. Yes, baby. Your daddy. Sophie shifted, clutching her teddy bear tighter. But, we don't have a daddy. Kate felt something twist deep inside her, a sharp pang of guilt and regret. I know, sweetheart. And that's because I made a decision a long time ago not to tell him about you. But I saw him today, and he knows now. And he wants to meet you. The girls exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them that only twins seemed to understand. Kate held her breath, waiting. Finally, Emily turned back to her. "Does he want to be our daddy?" Kate exhaled slowly, nodding. "Yes, baby. He does." Sophie was still frowning slightly. "Will he be nice like today?" Kate's throat felt tight again, but she nodded. "Yes. He wants to get to know you both. But only if you want to meet him." Emily bit her lip, looking down at her teddy bear as if it held the answer. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "Can we ask him questions?" Kate's lips curved into a small, sad smile. "Of course you can, sweetheart." Sophie was quiet for a moment longer before she nodded slowly. "Okay." Kate's heart clenched. "Okay." Emily nodded too, a little more confidently this time. "Okay." Kate felt a wave of relief so strong it almost made her dizzy. She hadn't known how this conversation would go, but now, as she looked at her daughters, so small, yet so open to the idea of something new, she felt the tiniest bit of hope settle in her chest. They didn't know Andrew yet. They had no idea how much their lives were about to change. But for now, they were willing to try. And that was more than she could have asked for. Andrew spent the entire night staring at the ceiling of his penthouse apartment, his mind racing with everything that had happened. He had walked into that toy store thinking it was just another ordinary day, but now his entire life had been flipped upside down. He had 2 daughters, ***, 2 daughters ***, and he hadn't known they existed until today. The reality of it settled like a weight on his chest, making it impossible to sleep. He had built his entire life around certainty, control, and predictability, but now none of those things existed anymore. He had spent years believing that he wasn't the kind of man who needed a family. He had convinced himself that his career, his success, and the empire he had built were all that mattered. But now, as he lay in the darkness of his bedroom, all he could think about were those 2 little girls. Their matching blonde hair, their bright blue eyes, ***, his eyes ***, and the way they had smiled at him with such innocent trust before running back to their mother. He wasn't sure how he was supposed to process it, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to walk away. The next afternoon, he found himself standing outside a small cafe, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Kate had texted him that morning, telling him that she had talked to the girls and that they wanted to meet him, really meet him ***, not just as the nice man from the toy store, but as their father. He had read her message at least a dozen times, trying to wrap his head around the idea that 2 5-year-olds had already made a decision about him, even before he had figured out what kind of father he was going to be. When the door to the cafe opened, Kate stepped out first, her long brown hair pulled back, her blue eyes scanning his face for something, hesitation, regret, maybe even fear. But he didn't feel any of those things. He just felt like his entire world was about to change, and for once, he wasn't sure if that was a bad thing. Then he saw them. Emily and Sophie stepped out from behind their mother, holding onto each other's hands like they weren't sure if they were supposed to let go. They were dressed in matching yellow dresses, their little faces filled with curiosity as they looked up at him. Andrew's heart clenched so hard he almost forgot how to breathe. Kate cleared her throat softly, glancing down at them. "Girls," she said gently. "This is Andrew." She hesitated for a moment before continuing, her voice quieter. "Your dad." The words sent a strange sort of shiver down his spine. He had been called a lot of things in his life, CEO, billionaire, leader, boss, but never dad. The girls stared at him for a long moment before Emily, the slightly bolder of the 2, took a small step forward. "You're really our daddy?" Andrew nodded slowly, his throat dry. "Yeah," he said, his voice softer than he had expected. "I am." Sophie studied him carefully, tilting her head to the side. "Why didn't you find us before?" The question hit him harder than he had expected. He glanced at Kate, who was already bracing herself, clearly ready to step in, but he shook his head slightly. He had to answer this himself. "I didn't know about you," he admitted honestly. "Your mom didn't tell me, and I didn't know to look." He hesitated before adding, "But I would have. If I had known, I would have looked for you." The girls exchanged a look, silently processing his words in a way only twins seem to understand. Emily crossed her arms. "Are you gonna leave now?" Andrew's chest tightened. "No. I don't want to leave." Sophie chewed on her lip. "Do you have another family?" His breath caught slightly at the question, and for the first time, he realized that was probably one of their biggest fears, that he had someone else, that he had a life where they didn't fit. He crouched down so that he was at their eye level, making sure they could see the sincerity in his face. "I don't have anyone else," he said softly. "Just you two." Emily's expression shifted slightly, as if she wasn't expecting that answer. Sophie's fingers curled against her dress as she studied him again. "Do you want to be our daddy?" she finally asked. Andrew didn't even hesitate. "More than anything." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then, to his complete surprise, Emily took a step closer and held out her small hand. Andrew stared at it for a second before slowly reaching out, his much larger hand wrapping around hers. Her grip was small but firm, and the warmth of it sent a strange wave of emotion rushing through him. Sophie hesitated for a moment longer before stepping forward too, taking his other hand. "Okay," she whispered. Andrew swallowed the lump in his throat, his entire world narrowing down to the two tiny hands holding onto his own. He wasn't sure what the future was going to look like. He wasn't sure how he was supposed to navigate any of this. But as he looked at his daughters, his daughters, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going anywhere. Andrew didn't know what he had expected from that first meeting, but as he walked away from the cafe, his mind was still trying to process everything that had just happened. The weight of his daughter's small hands in his own had lingered even after they had let go, and for the first time in his life, he had felt something that had nothing to do with business, power, or success. He had felt the terrifying, all-consuming reality that he was responsible for two little girls who had never even known he existed until today. Kate had agreed to let him see them again, but she had been clear, it had to be gradual. They needed time to get used to the idea of him, and as much as Andrew hated the thought of waiting, he understood. He had spent 5 years absent from their lives, even if it hadn't been his fault, and now he had to earn a place in them. That realization settled deep in his chest as he sat in his office later that evening, staring out over the city skyline. He had spent years building an empire, making a name for himself, but none of it had ever made him feel the way he had felt when Emily and Sophie had looked up at him and called him their daddy for the first time. When his phone buzzed, he glanced at the screen, surprised to see Kate's name. He hesitated for only a second before answering. "Hey," he said, leaning back in his chair. Kate's voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "The girls have been talking about you non-stop since we left the cafe. Emily keeps asking if you have a big office like the ones in cartoons, and Sophie wants to know if you ever fought a dragon." Andrew let out a breath of a laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "I hate to disappoint them, but I don't think running a company is nearly as exciting as fighting dragons." Kate was quiet for a moment before she spoke again. "They want to see you again. Soon." His heart skipped a beat. Yeah, she admitted. "I was going to wait a little longer, but I think if I do, they'll just keep asking until I give in." Andrew smiled at the thought, a warmth spreading through his chest. "I'm okay with that. What do you have in mind?" Kate hesitated before answering. "Something small. Something easy. Maybe the park. Somewhere they feel comfortable." Andrew nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "The park sounds perfect." They agreed on a time, and after they hung up, Andrew found himself staring at his phone for a long moment. This was happening. He was going to see them again, not as strangers, not as the man who had unknowingly bought them teddy bears in a toy store, but as their father. It was terrifying, overwhelming, and yet, for the first time in years, something in his life felt like it was exactly where it was supposed to be. When the day arrived, Andrew was standing at the entrance of the park before they even got there, his hands shoved into the pockets of his coat as he scanned the area. He had never been one for nervousness, but now, as he waited for Kate and the girls to arrive, he felt a kind of anxiety he had never experienced before. He wasn't used to being uncertain, to feeling like the outcome of something was completely out of his control. Then he saw them. Emily and Sophie were running ahead of Kate, their blonde hair bouncing as they raced toward the swings. Kate followed at a slower pace, giving him a brief nod before motioning toward the girls. "They're excited," she said. "And a little nervous." Andrew let out a breath. "Me too." Kate's lips curved slightly. "You'll be fine." He wasn't sure if that was true, but he appreciated the attempt at reassurance. The girls were already climbing onto the swings when they finally noticed him standing nearby. Emily waved first, her little face lighting up. "You came." Andrew smiled. "Of course I did." Sophie tilted her head. "Did you bring a dragon?" He chuckled, walking closer. "Not this time. But maybe next time." Emily kicked her feet, trying to get the swing moving. "Can you push us?" For a moment, Andrew just stood there, struck by how natural the request was. They weren't treating him like a stranger, weren't acting like they were unsure about him being here. They were just two little girls who wanted their dad to push them on the swings. "Yeah," he said, stepping behind them. "I can do that." He started slow, his hands carefully pressing against their backs as they swung higher. Their laughter filled the air, and for the first time in his life, Andrew realized that success didn't have to come from boardrooms or bank accounts. Sometimes, it was as simple as being here. Andrew had never thought something as simple as an afternoon at the park could mean so much. He had spent years negotiating million-dollar deals, attending high-profile events, and making decisions that affected thousands of people, but none of it had ever felt as significant as this moment, standing behind his daughters, pushing them on the swings, listening to their laughter as they soared higher into the air. It was the kind of moment he had never allowed himself to imagine, yet now that he was here, he couldn't believe he had almost missed it. Emily was the more adventurous of the two, leaning back slightly as she swung higher, her blonde curls bouncing in the wind. Sophie, on the other hand, was more cautious, giggling nervously whenever her feet left the ground for a second too long. He quickly learned their limits, how much of a push was just right for Sophie, how Emily liked to go higher, how they both squealed with laughter when he surprised them by giving them an extra little boost. After a while, they slowed down, dragging their feet against the dirt to stop the swings. Sophie hopped off first, running toward the slide, while Emily turned to face him, her blue eyes filled with curiosity. "Do you come to the park a lot?" she asked, tilting her head. Andrew let out a small laugh, shaking his head. "Not really. I don't think I've been to a park since I was a kid." Emily frowned as if that was the strangest thing she had ever heard. "But where do you play?" He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to answer that. He had spent so much of his life working, pushing himself harder, climbing higher, that the idea of just playing, just enjoying life for the sake of it, felt completely foreign to him. "I guess I never really thought about it," he admitted. Emily seemed to consider this before taking his hand and giving it a small tug. "Come on," she said. "Let's go play." Andrew glanced at Kate, who was watching them from a nearby bench with a knowing smile, and then back at Emily, who was already pulling him toward the jungle gym. He had never been one to say no to a challenge, and if his daughter thought he needed to learn how to play, he wasn't going to argue. For the next hour, Andrew did things he never thought he'd do. He climbed through tunnels too small for him, slid down slides that were clearly not designed for adults, and even found himself on a seesaw with Sophie, who giggled every time she went up in the air. It was ridiculous, it was childish, and yet he couldn't remember the last time he had laughed so much. At one point, he was helping Sophie build a sandcastle near the edge of the playground when Emily plopped down beside him, resting her chin on her hands. "You're funny," she said, watching him carefully. Andrew raised an eyebrow. "Funny how?" She shrugged. "I thought daddies were supposed to be serious all the time. But you're not." Something about that statement made his heart tighten. He had spent his whole life being serious, being the man people expected him to be. But with them, with his daughters, he didn't have to be that person. He could just be Dad. "I can be serious sometimes," he said with a smirk. "But only when I have to." Emily grinned. "Good. Because serious is boring." Sophie nodded in agreement, patting the top of their sandcastle. "We like you not boring." Andrew felt something shift deep inside him, something he couldn't quite put into words. They liked him. Not because he was successful or powerful, not because he had bought them toys or taken them to the park. They liked him just because he was there. Kate called them over a few minutes later, letting them know it was time to go. Andrew felt a pang of disappointment, realizing he wasn't ready for the day to end. He had spent so much of his life chasing the next big thing, always looking ahead, always focused on what came next. But today, for the first time, he just wanted to stay in the moment. As they walked toward the parking lot, Sophie reached up and took his hand without a second thought. He glanced down at her, surprised, but she just smiled up at him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Emily, not wanting to be left out, grabbed his other hand, swinging their arms back and forth as they walked. Andrew caught Kate watching them, her expression unreadable. For a moment, he worried she would pull them away, remind them to take things slow, but instead, she just gave him a small nod, an unspoken agreement that, at least for now, this was okay. When they reached Kate's car, Sophie turned to him, her little face serious. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" Andrew crouched down so he was at eye level with both of them. "If you want me to." Emily nodded without hesitation. "Yes." Sophie grinned. "Then you have to." Andrew smiled, feeling something settle inside him, something that had been restless ever since he had found out about them. "Okay. I'll be here." Kate watched the exchange carefully, and when the girls climbed into the car, she hesitated for a moment before speaking. "They like you." Andrew met her gaze. "I like them too." She nodded slowly, as if trying to decide whether or not to believe him. "Then don't disappoint them." Her words weren't a threat, but they carried weight. He knew that after 5 years of raising them on her own, after 5 years of making every decision for them, trusting him wasn't going to be easy for her. And he didn't blame her. "I won't," he said simply. Kate studied him for a moment longer before finally nodding. "See you tomorrow, then." As he watched them drive away, Andrew realized something. For the first time in his life, he had something worth showing up for. And he wasn't going to let it go. Andrew had always believed that his success was measured by what he built, the deals he closed, the companies he expanded, the numbers in his bank account. But as the days passed, as he spent more time with Emily and Sophie, he started to realize that none of that compared to what he was building now. The next afternoon, as promised, he showed up at the park again, but this time, something was different. When the girls saw him, they didn't hesitate. They didn't study him with cautious curiosity or treat him like someone they were still trying to figure out. Instead, they ran straight toward him, their little feet kicking up dust as they threw themselves at his legs, wrapping their small arms around him without a second thought. For a moment, Andrew just stood there, completely still, trying to process the fact that his daughters were hugging him like he belonged to them. He wasn't sure what to do with the unexpected warmth flooding his chest, so he did the only thing that made sense, he crouched down and hugged them back. Kate watched from a few steps away, her arms crossed over her chest, but there was no tension in her face this time. Just something softer, something almost hesitant, as if she wasn't sure whether to trust what she was seeing. Sophie was the first to pull back, her blue eyes shining as she grinned up at him. "We thought maybe you forgot." Andrew smirked, ruffling her blonde curls. "I told you I'd be here." Emily looked at him seriously. "People say things sometimes, but then they don't come." Something about the way she said it made his stomach twist, and he glanced up at Kate, who was already looking away, pretending to focus on something else. He realized then that this wasn't just about proving himself to his daughters. It was about proving himself to their mother, too. He exhaled and looked back at Emily. "Well, I'm not just people. I'm your dad." Emily studied him for a moment before finally nodding, as if deciding that was an acceptable answer. Then she grabbed his hand, tugging him toward the jungle gym. "Come on, we have a game to play." The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and small victories. Sophie made him sit on the grass and watch as she tried, and failed, to do a cartwheel, giggling each time she landed sideways. Emily insisted he help her climb the monkey bars, and when she finally made it across, she beamed at him with a kind of pride that made something in his chest ache. Kate stayed nearby, watching, but she didn't interfere. She let him be their dad. As the sun began to set, they all made their way back to the parking lot, the girls walking in front of them, still holding their teddy bears from the toy store as they chatted about the best part of the day. Kate glanced at him. "You're good with them." Andrew looked at her, surprised. It was the first time she had acknowledged that. "I don't know what I'm doing half the time," he admitted. "I'm just trying to figure it out as I go." She smiled slightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Welcome to parenting." He let out a soft chuckle. "You make it look easy." She shook her head. "It's not. But it's worth it." He nodded, watching his daughters walk ahead of them, their small hands swinging in the air as they talked. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is." As they reached the car, Emily turned around. "Can we see you again tomorrow?" Andrew didn't even hesitate. "Of course." Sophie looked at him with wide eyes. "And the day after?" He crouched down so he was at their level. "I'll be there for as many days as you want me to be." Emily grinned. "Forever?" Andrew felt his throat tighten. He looked up at Kate, whose face was unreadable, before turning back to his daughters. "Forever." Kate didn't say anything as she helped them into the car, but before she closed the door, she looked at him for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. He had a lot to make up for. He had lost years he could never get back. But he had today, and he had tomorrow. And for the first time in his life, he knew exactly what he was fighting for. The ending of this story carries a deep emotional weight because it is not just about a man discovering he has children, it is about redemption, second chances, and the power of love to reshape even the most rigid of lives. Andrew starts as a man who thrives on control, who believes success is measured by power and achievements. But through Emily and Sophie, he learns that true success isn't about money or status, it's about showing up, about being there for the people who need you the most. Kate's journey is just as significant. She made a choice years ago out of fear, out of a desire to protect her daughters from disappointment. She believed she was doing what was best, but in the process, she denied them the chance to know their father. Watching her lower her walls, seeing her begin to trust Andrew, is just as much a transformation as his own. But the heart of this story lies with Emily and Sophie. They are innocent, full of unconditional love, and open to letting someone new into their world. They are the ones who teach Andrew what it means to be a father, not through grand gestures, but through the small, everyday moments that build a real bond. Their acceptance of him isn't about his wealth or success, but simply because he is theirs. The final moments, where Andrew promises to be there forever, are a powerful reflection of how far he has come. In the beginning, he was a man who had no idea what he was missing. By the end, he knows exactly what he has found, and he refuses to let it go. It's a story about finding what truly matters, about taking responsibility, and about learning that love, real, unconditional love, is the most valuable thing a person can have. The past can't be changed, but the future is built on choices. And Andrew, for the first time in his life, is choosing something greater than himself.
The Unexpected Heir, A Billionaire's Road to Redemption. Get ready for a powerful story about hidden truths, unexpected love, and the ultimate sacrifice for family. Hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments, have you ever had a chance encounter that completely changed the course of your life? Part 1. A shocking revelation. The engine of the Audi R8 purred to a stop in front of the modest shelter on the outskirts of the city. Alexander Thorne, impeccably dressed in a tailored Italian suit, observed the dilapidated building through the windshield. It was hardly the kind of place he frequented, but the board of directors had insisted he personally handle the delivery, a substantial donation that would significantly boost his company's public image. While 2 employees unloaded boxes from the boot, Alexander checked his gold watch. 5 minutes, signed some papers, and he'd be back in his office for a video conference with European investors. Simple, quick, efficient. The inside of the shelter smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. An elderly volunteer guided him down a narrow corridor, explaining the services they offered to vulnerable single mothers. Alexander nodded mechanically, more focused on the incessant messages arriving on his smartphone than on the conversation. "This way, Mr. Thorne. The director is waiting for you in the common room." Alexander looked up from his phone as he entered a large, brightly lit room. Time seemed to freeze. Among a group of women cradling their babies, a familiar figure caught his eye. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. The same honey-colored eyes that had captivated him a year ago. Camilla, she saw him, and her face visibly blanched. Instinctively, she clutched the baby she held to her chest, a newborn, from what Alexander could tell. Blood ran cold in his veins when he noticed the tiny features of the infant, the same distinctive mole under the right eye that he shared with his father and grandfather. "Mr. Thorne?" The director's voice sounded distant, as if from another world. "Is everything all right?" Alexander ignored the question, his eyes fixed on Camilla, who was now desperately trying to slip away towards a side door. "Camilla, wait!" She froze, her shoulders tense, but didn't turn around. The baby let out a soft whimper. "When?" The word escaped Alexander's lips as a low growl, loaded with an explosive mixture of emotions. "When were you planning to tell me?" The other women in the room sensed the tension and began to discreetly withdraw. The director, grasping the charged situation, followed them, leaving Alexander and Camilla alone. Camilla finally turned, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Alexander, Is he mine?" The question was unnecessary. The resemblance was undeniable, but he needed to hear it from her lips. "His name is Samuel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's 3 weeks old." Alexander took a step towards them, but Camilla instinctively recoiled. The gesture struck him like a physical blow. "Why?" The word contained years of reproach, confusion, and raw pain. "We had a life together, Camilla. Why did you disappear like that? Why hide this from me?" A lone tear rolled down Camilla's cheek. "It's not all as it seems, Alexander. There are things you don't know. Things that—" Samuel's cries interrupted her words, a tiny, desperate sound. Camilla began to gently rock him, her eyes never leaving Alexander. "Don't you dare leave again." Alexander's voice softened, but maintained its intensity. "This time, I won't let you disappear. Not without explanations." The air between them vibrated with unanswered questions and hidden truths. Samuel gradually calmed in his mother's arms, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. "All right," Camilla finally conceded, her shoulders slumping in a gesture of defeat. "But not here, not like this." Alexander nodded slowly, pulling out his phone to cancel all his meetings for the day. Nothing else mattered now. Both their worlds had just changed irrevocably, and the answers he sought couldn't wait another minute. What do you think of Alexander's shocking discovery? Was Camilla right to keep Samuel a secret? Share your thoughts below. Part 2. Unearthing the Past. The coffee shop near the shelter was almost empty at that late hour of the afternoon. Alexander chose a secluded table, away from the windows and curious glances. Camilla sat opposite him, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his car seat. "Coffee, please. Black," Alexander told the waitress. "Camilla? Water is fine, thank you." Her voice sounded tired, resigned. The silence between them weighed heavily. Alexander couldn't stop looking at Samuel, studying every tiny detail of his sleeping face. It was surreal to think that just an hour ago, his biggest concern had been a video conference with investors. "Why the shelter?" he asked first, avoiding the more difficult questions for the moment. Camilla nervously fiddled with the paper napkin. "I volunteer there. I help other mothers, teach them about basic baby care, legal procedures." She stopped, as if she had said too much. "And you live in a small flat a few blocks away. It's not much, but it's enough for us." Alexander clenched his fists under the table. The thought that his son had been born in such circumstances, when he could have provided them with everything, was agonizing. "I tried to contact you," Camilla's words interrupted his thoughts. "When I found out I was pregnant." "Oh, really?" The irony in his voice was palpable. "And what happened? Because as far as I know, you just disappeared one day. No explanations, no note, nothing." Samuel stirred in his sleep, and both held their breath until he settled again. "It wasn't that simple." Camilla looked up, and for the first time Alexander saw something more than fear in her eyes. There was pain, and also anger. Eleanor saw to that. The name dropped like a bomb between them. Eleanor. His ex-fiancée, the woman he had tried to rebuild his life with after Camilla abandoned him. Or at least, that was the version he had known until now. "What does Eleanor have to do with any of this?" "She intercepted me the day I was going to your office to tell you about the pregnancy." Camilla swallowed hard, as if the words burned her throat. "She showed me photos of you two together, told me you were engaged, that you had already started planning the wedding." "That was after you left." Alexander leaned forward, confused. "Months after, not according to the dates on the photos." Camilla pulled out her phone, found something, and handed it to Alexander. "Look at the date on the newspaper Eleanor is holding in this engagement photo." Alexander took the phone and felt the ground open beneath him. The date on the newspaper was 3 months before Camilla disappeared. This isn't possible. I never—" "She also had messages, emails," Camilla continued, her voice trembling slightly. "She told me that if I dared to appear in your life with a baby, she would make sure to destroy my career, my reputation, that she had the means and contacts to do it." Alexander ran a hand over his face, trying to process all this new, devastating information. How had he not noticed? How had he been so blind? "There's more," Camilla added softly, looking at Samuel, "but I think that's enough for today." Alexander nodded, understanding that this was just the tip of the iceberg. As he watched his son sleep, a fierce determination formed within him. He would discover the complete truth, no matter the cost. What do you think of Eleanor's betrayal? Is she truly capable of such manipulation? Share your thoughts below. Part 3. A Father's Resolve. The afternoon was falling over the city when Alexander parked in front of the modest apartment building where Camilla lived. Samuel had woken up during the drive, and his small, dark eyes observed everything with wide-eyed curiosity. "You don't have to come up," Camilla murmured, unbuckling the car seat. "Please." Alexander's voice sounded different, softer than she remembered. "I need to get to know him properly." Camilla hesitated for a moment before nodding. The lift was out of order, so they climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The apartment was small, but clean, with a few baby toys scattered around the living room. "Sit down," Camilla indicated, gesturing towards a worn sofa as she cradled Samuel. "Do you want to hold him?" Alexander felt his heart pound. With trembling hands, he took the little one Camilla offered him. Samuel stared at him intently, and for a moment, father and son studied each other. "He has your eyes," Camilla whispered, sitting beside them, "and the mole." Alexander gently touched the small mark under Samuel's right eye. "Like my father and my grandfather. That's why I couldn't deny it when he was born." Camilla smiled faintly. "He's just like you." The silence that followed was heavy with contained emotions. Samuel played with Alexander's tie, oblivious to the tension surrounding him. "Why didn't you fight?" Alexander finally asked. "Why didn't you insist on seeing me, on telling me the truth?" Camilla stood up, walking towards the window. "Eleanor had proof of irregularities at the clinic where I worked. Falsified documents, altered prescriptions, all fabricated, of course, but convincing enough to destroy my career. We could have faced it together." "How?" Camilla turned, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You loved her, or so I believed. Every magazine, every newspaper showed how happy you two were together. The successful businessman and the perfect heiress." Alexander lowered his gaze to Samuel, who was beginning to doze in his arms. "I never loved her. It was a desperate attempt to move on after losing you. And now, what do you want, Alexander?" The question hung between them like a storm cloud. "I want to be part of his life," he replied without hesitation. "Of both your lives, if you'll let me." "It's not that simple." "I know," Alexander said, carefully rising, holding Samuel close. "But for the first time in a long time, I know exactly what I want, and I'll do whatever it takes to get it." "What do you think of Camilla's reasons for not fighting for Alexander? Is her fear understandable?" Share your thoughts below. Part 4. Unveiling Eleanor's scheme. Alexander's office remained silent as he meticulously reviewed files on his computer. It was 3 a.m., but sleep was the last thing on his mind. On the screen, dozens of old emails revealed a devastating truth. "Mr. Thorne?" His personal assistant, Mark, entered with a folder. "I found what you asked for, last year's security records." Alexander took the folder with trembling hands. The security camera recordings confirmed Camilla's story. She had tried to see him 3 times that month, and each time, Eleanor had intercepted her in the lobby, effectively blocking her access. "Anything else I should know, Mark?" The assistant hesitated for a moment. "Eleanor used to ask me to filter your calls and messages. She said you were very stressed and needed to focus on work. And you never thought to mention it to me?" "She was your fiancée, sir. I assumed that." Mark trailed off, uncomfortable. "I'm sorry. I should have questioned it." Alexander leaned back in his chair, exhausted. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. The missed calls, the messages that never arrived, the orchestrated coincidences that kept Camilla away. His phone vibrated. A message from Camilla. "Samuel has a fever. Nothing serious. But he's restless." Without a second thought, Alexander grabbed his jacket. "Cancel my meetings for tomorrow, Mark. Camilla's apartment was in darkness when he arrived. She opened the door with Samuel in her arms, the baby whimpering softly. "You didn't have to come." "I am his father." The word still felt strange on his lips, but right. "What does the doctor say?" "It's just a cold. I gave him the medicine, but he won't sleep." Camilla allowed Alexander to enter. He extended his arms, and Camilla, after a moment of hesitation, passed the baby to him. Samuel nestled against his chest, his small body warm with fever. "I found proof." Alexander gently rocked Samuel as he spoke. "Of everything Eleanor did. The emails, the manipulated photos, the threats." Camilla sat on the sofa, exhausted. "It doesn't matter anymore." "It does matter." Alexander's voice was firm. "Because it means you never stopped fighting for us, and I was too blind to see it." Samuel finally began to drift off to sleep, his breathing becoming more regular. Alexander gently laid him in his crib, watching his small chest rise and fall. "What are we going to do now?" Camilla whispered from the bedroom doorway. Alexander turned to her, determination shining in his eyes. "We're going to make up for lost time, if you'll let me." "What do you think Alexander will do to confront Eleanor? And what does making up for lost time mean for him and Camilla? Share your predictions below. Part 5. Breaking Free. Alexander's lawyer, Liam Vance, was a sharp, formidable man with an elegant office overlooking the city's financial district. Mark Stone, who had handled the Thorne family's legal affairs for decades, listened intently as Alexander explained the devastating situation. "Do you understand the gravity of these accusations?" Liam asked, adjusting his spectacles as he reviewed the documents scattered across his desk. "Eleanor Thorne is not just anyone. Her family has powerful connections. I don't give a damn who she is." Alexander stood up, unable to contain his raw energy. "She destroyed my life, manipulated everything around her, and kept my son from me. And Camilla," Liam added softly. Alexander stopped by the window, observing the city sprawling beneath him. "I need you to prepare everything. Paternity tests, acknowledgement documents, whatever is necessary to protect Samuel. And what about Eleanor? I want her to pay for what she did." Alexander turned, his eyes burning with cold determination. "But first, I need to set things right with Camilla." The chime of his phone interrupted the conversation. It was a message from Camilla with a photo of Samuel smiling during his bath. Something melted inside Alexander when he saw that innocent smile. "I'll help you," Liam said, beginning to organize the papers. "But you must be cautious. Eleanor won't sit idly by." Alexander left the office with a mixture of conflicting emotions. Guilt for not seeing the signs sooner, rage towards Eleanor, and a profound yearning to reclaim what he had lost. In the car park, a familiar figure waited by his car. Eleanor. She smiled, as elegant and calculating as ever. "Alexander, darling, did you really think I wouldn't find out? We have nothing to talk about." "Oh, but we do." Eleanor took a step towards him. "Do you think Camilla will forgive you so easily? That she'll forget how you abandoned her?" "I didn't abandon her." Alexander faced her, his voice trembling with contained fury. "You saw to that. You made sure to drive her away." "I only did what was necessary." Eleanor maintained her smile, but her eyes were cold, devoid of warmth. "We were perfect together, Alexander. We still can be." "You're sick." Alexander pulled out his phone. "All the proof of what you did. This time, you won't be able to manipulate the situation." Eleanor's smile finally faltered, replaced by a flicker of fear. "Be careful, Alexander. Dirty wars always leave innocent victims." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning." Eleanor turned to leave, but stopped. "Give my regards to little Samuel." Alexander felt his blood run cold. Seeing Eleanor mention his son's name filled him with a fear he had never experienced before. He needed to protect his family, whatever the cost. What do you think of Eleanor's parting warning? Is she a credible threat? Or is Alexander finally in control? Share your thoughts below. Alexander arrived at Camilla's flat with a small gift bag in his hands. The sound of a lullaby filtered through the door as he waited for it to open. "You're early," Camilla murmured as she opened the door, Samuel asleep on her shoulder. "I brought something for him." Alexander extended the bag, noticing the dark circles under Camilla's eyes. "Difficult night?" "He's been colicky." Camilla let him in, heading to the baby's room. "He barely slept." Alexander followed in silence, watching her gently lay Samuel in his crib. The mobile above the crib spun slowly, casting soft shadows of animals on the walls. "It's a rattle," Alexander explained, taking the gift from the bag. "My father gave me one, just like it, when I was little." Camilla took the toy, her fingers accidentally brushing Alexander's. The contact, though brief, sent an electric current between them. "Thank you." She placed it next to the crib. "Want some coffee?" In the tiny kitchen, Alexander watched Camilla prepare 2 cups. Her movements were mechanical, as if she were trying to maintain an emotional distance that was slowly crumbling. "I spoke to my lawyer," Alexander commented, blowing on his hot coffee. "About acknowledging Samuel legally." Camilla visibly tensed. "There's no need to rush." "It's not rushing, Camilla. It's responsibility." Alexander put down his cup. "He also warned me about Eleanor. Did you see her? She found me in the car park." Alexander noticed Camilla pale. "Don't worry. I have everything under control." "You thought that before," she murmured, her voice tinged with bitterness. But Samuel's cries interrupted the conversation. Alexander was the first to rise. "I'll go." In the room, Samuel greeted him with wide, teary eyes. Alexander carefully picked him up, recalling the instructions he had obsessively read online about how to hold a newborn. "Hey, champ," he whispered, gently rocking him. "Can't sleep?" To his surprise, Samuel began to calm down. His tiny hands clutched Alexander's shirt as his eyes began to close again. "You have a gift," Camilla said from the doorway, her expression softened by the scene in front of her. "It's instinct." Alexander continued to rock Samuel. "It's like a part of me has been waiting for this moment my whole life." Camilla approached, adjusting the blanket around the baby. For a moment, all 3 were so close that Alexander could feel the warmth of her body, smell the soft scent of her hair. "I promise this time will be different," Camilla whispered, her voice raw with emotion. She looked up, her eyes meeting his. For the first time since their reunion, Alexander saw a glimmer of hope in them. Part 8. A new path. A new family. Camilla watched from the shelter window as Alexander played with Samuel in the small garden. Over the past 2 weeks, he had appeared religiously every afternoon, without missing a single day, dedicating hours to learning every detail of his son's life. "He's a good father," commented Maria, the shelter director, approaching with 2 cups of tea. "You can tell he's genuinely trying." "He seems to be." Camilla accepted the cup, but her eyes never left the scene outside. "But," Maria prompted gently, "but every time I see him with Samuel, every time I notice how much they look alike." Camilla paused, swallowing a lump in her throat. "I think of everything we lost because of Eleanor." In the garden, Alexander had spread a blanket on the grass and was showing Samuel a picture book. The baby babbled, trying to grab the colorful pages. "What if it happens again?" Camilla turned to Maria. "What if I trust him and make the same mistake?" "Fear is natural, dear." Maria gently squeezed her shoulder. "But it can also become a prison." Camilla's phone vibrated. A message from her sister. "Camilla, did you see the news? Eleanor Thorne resigned from her position at the family company. They say there's a covered-up scandal. Alexander is fighting for you two." "He's fighting for you," Maria continued, noticing Camilla's worried expression. Sometimes forgiveness isn't just for the other person, but for ourselves. In the garden, Samuel began to cry. Before Camilla could move, Alexander had already picked him up, rocking him with a natural ease that seemed impossible for someone who had only just met his son. "He needs his nap," Camilla murmured, stepping into the garden. Alexander greeted her with a tired smile. "I know. I recognize this cry now." Their fingers brushed as Camilla took Samuel, and for a moment neither of them moved. It was as if time had frozen, trapping them in a bubble where the past and its wounds didn't exist. "Camilla." Alexander's voice was soft, almost a plea. "Can we talk? Without walls, without fears, just us." She looked at her son, who had already fallen asleep in her arms. "I don't know if I'm ready." "I understand." Alexander picked up the blanket and the book. "But I want you to know that I won't give up. Not this time. Even if Eleanor tries to destroy you, she no longer has power over us." Alexander approached, gently stroking Samuel's cheek. "I've presented all the evidence. Her family preferred to silence the scandal, removing her from the company." Camilla felt something loosen in her chest, a knot that had been present for so long, that it had become a part of her. Perhaps Maria was right. Perhaps it was time to let the walls begin to fall. What do you think of Alexander's progress in earning Camilla's trust? Is he ready for this commitment? Share your thoughts below. Part 9. Building Trust. Brick by brick. Eleanor's office on the top floor of the Thorne building was being emptied when Alexander arrived. Employees carried boxes under the watchful eye of security, while Eleanor remained seated behind her desk, as elegant as ever, despite the circumstances. "You came to gloat," she said, not looking up from the documents she was signing. "I came to make sure you understand the message," Alexander said, closing the door behind him. "Stay away from my family." Eleanor finally looked at him, a cold smile on her perfectly painted lips. "Your family? The same one you abandoned for me?" "The same one you made me believe I abandoned." Alexander placed a folder on the desk with all the proof of her manipulations. Every altered email, every manipulated photo, every chilling threat. "And what did you gain?" Eleanor stood, circling the desk. "Camilla has forgiven you. She already trusts you." Alexander maintained his position, though Eleanor's every word was like a poisoned dagger. "I'm not here for that. I'm here to warn you." "You warn me?" Eleanor laughed, but the sound lacked any humor. "Dear, you haven't seen what I'm capable of yet. If you go near Camilla or Samuel," Alexander's voice dropped to a dangerously low tone, "I'll make sure every company in this country knows your true nature, your ruthless methods." "And you think that will stop me?" Eleanor stepped closer, her intense perfume filling the space between them. "You were always so naive, Alexander. So easy to manipulate." "Not anymore." Alexander took a step back. "This time, I'm one step ahead." As if on cue, the door opened, and Eleanor's father entered, followed by Liam, Alexander's lawyer. "That's enough, Eleanor." Her father's voice boomed with authority. "The agreement is signed. If you try anything against the Thorne family, the consequences will be immediate." Eleanor visibly paled. "Dad!" Not another word. Eleanor's father turned to Alexander. "You have my word. My daughter will not interfere in your life again." Alexander nodded, picking up the folder from the desk. Before leaving, he stopped at the door. "By the way, Eleanor," he turned one last time, "Samuel has my eyes, and Camilla's smile. He's perfect." In the lift, Liam handed him the final documents. "It's done. Eleanor will be transferred to the European branch. The agreement includes a restraining order." Alexander took a deep breath for the first time in weeks. His phone vibrated. A message from Camilla with a photo of Samuel asleep, surrounded by his toys. Was it worth it? Liam asked, noticing his expression. Alexander smiled, putting his phone away. Every single second. Now only the hardest part remained, rebuilding trust with Camilla, step by step, day by day, until the walls between them finally completely crumbled. Part 10. Building a future. One step at a time. The playground was almost empty that Sunday afternoon. Camilla watched from a bench as Alexander gently pushed Samuel's pram, telling stories that the baby listened to with rapt attention, as if he understood every word. "Your grandfather built this company from scratch," Alexander explained, his voice soft and patient. "Someday it will be yours if you wish." Camilla couldn't help but smile. Just a month ago, the idea of Alexander being so close to Samuel terrified her. Now, seeing them together felt natural, as if it had always been this way. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander sat beside her as Samuel dozed peacefully in his pram. "How things have changed. Eleanor, the company, us." "Us?" Alexander looked at her intently, but without pressure. "You know what I mean." Camilla looked away towards the park. "The way you defended Samuel, how you stood up to Eleanor, it was the right thing to do." Alexander leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I should have done it sooner, if only I had seen the signs." A group of children ran by, their laughter filling the air. Camilla imagined Samuel in a few years, playing in that same park, with Alexander teaching him to ride a bike. "Maria says fear can become a prison," Camilla murmured, recalling the director's words. "And what do you think?" "I think," Camilla took a deep breath, "that perhaps it's time to open some doors." Alexander turned to her, his eyes shining with contained hope. At that moment, Samuel began to stir in his pram, his tiny fists waving in the air. "Is he hungry?" they both asked in unison, then laughed at the coincidence. "Do you want to come home?" Camilla proposed, surprising herself. "We could have dinner together." Alexander's smile lit up his face. "I'd love that." As they walked towards the apartment, their steps naturally synchronized. Camilla felt something shift inside her. The cracks in the wall she had built around her heart were growing wider, letting in rays of light she thought were lost forever. "Camilla?" Alexander stopped in front of the building. "Thank you." "Why?" "For giving me the chance to be a part of this." He gestured towards Samuel, towards her, towards the moment they shared. "To be part of our family." The word family resonated in the air between them, laden with promises and possibilities. Camilla felt her heart race, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't out of fear. "Come on," she said simply, holding the door open. "Dinner won't make itself." And as they climbed the stairs, with Alexander carefully carrying Samuel's pram, Camilla allowed herself to imagine a different future. One where walls weren't necessary, where love was stronger than fear. Part 11. Love's True Home. The phone rang at 3 a.m. "Alexander!" Alexander woke with a start, recognizing the special tone he had assigned to Camilla's calls. "Samuel has a high fever." Camilla's voice trembled. "It won't go down with the medicine, and he's breathing strangely." "I'm on my way!" Alexander was already getting dressed as he spoke. "Call emergency services. I'll meet you at the hospital." The drive to Camilla's apartment was a blur of traffic lights and empty streets. When he arrived, she was already waiting at the entrance with Samuel in her arms, the baby's face flushed with fever. "The ambulance is on its way," Camilla murmured, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Alexander took Samuel into his arms, feeling the heat emanating from his small body. "Hey, champ, Daddy's here." The ambulance lights illuminated the street seconds later. The journey to the hospital was tense, with paramedics constantly monitoring Samuel's vital signs. Camilla clung to Alexander's hand as if it were her only anchor to reality. "Bronchiolitis," the on-call pediatrician explained after examining Samuel. "It's common in babies his age, but he'll need to stay overnight for observation." The hospital room was small but private, with a special crib where Samuel rested, connected to monitors. Camilla refused to leave his side while Alexander handled the administrative procedures. "You should rest a bit," Alexander suggested, but Camilla just shook her head. "I can't." Camilla accepted the coffee, but didn't take her eyes off Samuel. "Every time he closes his eyes, I get scared." "He's in good hands," Alexander said, sitting beside her, their shoulders touching lightly. "And we're here, together." The hours passed slowly. Samuel's fever gradually began to subside, and his breathing became less labored. Near dawn, Camilla finally succumbed to exhaustion, her head resting on Alexander's shoulder. He watched her sleep, noticing the lines of worry on her face, the way her hand was still extended toward Samuel's crib, even in dreams. Carefully, he removed her shoes and covered her with his jacket. "Thank you," she whispered without opening her eyes, snuggling closer. "For what?" "For being here, for not giving up." The sun was just beginning to peek through the window when Samuel woke, his eyes brighter and more alert. The pediatrician, satisfied with his progress, authorized his discharge for that afternoon. "I'll take you home," Alexander said as they packed their things. Camilla nodded, and for the first time in a long time, there was no doubt in her gaze, only trust, and something more. Something neither of them had named yet. Part 12. Building our home. Alexander parked his car in front of the apartment building, checking the small box in his jacket pocket for the third time. After weeks of planning, he had finally found the perfect moment. The lift, miraculously working that day, took him to the third floor. He could hear Samuel's laughter from the hallway, that sound that had become the favorite melody of his days. Camilla opened the door, a warm smile on her face. Samuel was crawling around the living room, chasing a musical toy. "I have something for you, too," Alexander said, bending down to pick up Samuel, who immediately tried to grab his tie. "Can we talk?" Camilla nodded, though Alexander noticed a flash of concern in her eyes. They sat on the sofa with Samuel playing between them. "These past few months have been. I'm infinitely grateful for them, Camilla." "Alexander, let me finish a bit, please." He pulled the small box from his pocket. "It's not what you think." Inside the box were two gleaming golden keys. "What's this?" Camilla asked, taking one of the keys, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I bought my parents' house." Alexander smiled at the surprise on Camilla's face. "The house where I grew up, where I learned to walk." Camilla's fingers traced the keys, fascinated by their sparkle. "It's 10 minutes from the shelter," Alexander continued. "It has a huge garden, spacious rooms, and—" He paused meaningfully. "The best playroom a child could ever wish for." "Alexander, we can't—" "It's not pressure," he interrupted softly. "It's an option. The house belongs to Samuel. It's in his name, legally." Camilla's gaze shifted from the keys in her hand to Samuel, who was now resting calmly in his father's lap. "Why your parents' house?" "Because that's where I was truly happy." Alexander gently stroked Samuel's hair. "Because I want our son to have the same wonderful memories I had. And because—" he took a deep breath, "because it's the only place I can imagine raising our family." Samuel yawned, oblivious to the crucial moment unfolding around him. "And the other key?" Camilla finally asked, her voice a mere whisper. "It's yours if you want it." Alexander looked her in the eyes, without conditions, without pressure. Only the profound promise that no matter what, they would always be a family for Samuel. Camilla took the second key, her fingers brushing Alexander's. The contact sent a familiar electric current between them, connecting everything they had been, everything they had lost, and all that they could now have again. What do you think of Alexander's grand gesture? Is this the happy ending Camilla and Samuel deserve? Share your thoughts below. Alexander's parents' house was exactly as Camilla remembered it, imposing yet welcoming. With its stone walls and large windows that let in the warm afternoon light. As she walked through the empty rooms with Samuel in her arms, memories flooded her like a gentle tide. "This is where I met you," Alexander said, stopping at the threshold of the main living room at the company's Christmas party. "You spilled punch on my dress," Camilla smiled, the memory as vivid as if it had been yesterday, "and you lent me your jacket." Alexander approached, his eyes shining with nostalgia. "You never returned it. I still have it." The confession came out almost as a whisper. Samuel stirred in Camilla's arms, reaching out towards his father. "This will be your room, champ." Alexander opened a door that led to a spacious room overlooking the garden. "My father painted these walls for me when I was little." Camilla observed the faded murals of animals and trees that covered the walls. "They're beautiful." "We can redecorate." Alexander turned to her. "Make this space our own." The word "our" hung in the air, against the idea of trusting again, of loving again. But here, in this house full of memories and promises, her fears seemed smaller. "Maria was right," she murmured, walking to a window that overlooked the back garden. "About what?" "About fear becoming a prison." Camilla turned to look at him. "I've been so scared of suffering again that I almost lost the chance to be happy." Alexander gently put Samuel down on the carpet, and the baby immediately began to explore his new surroundings, completely content. What do you think of Camilla's reflection on fear? And how will this new home impact their family? Share your thoughts below.